Good morning. I want to wrap up King Lear today by talking about three or four things that I didn't get to in class on Friday. This presentation is going to be very short. Remember, there's a quiz in class today. The quiz is on D2L. And remember that there's a student presentation in class today as well. So we're going to try to deal with all three of those things as we run through the final day of King Lear here. First, I'm going to talk about the ending. I have a journey, sir, shortly to go. My master calls me. I must not say no. Clearly, he's talking about death. Clearly, there's this implication, perhaps, of suicide. At the same time, I sometimes wonder if Kent is not just saying what Roger Murtaugh, who was played by Danny Glover in the movie Lethal Weapon, is saying is, I'm just too old. This has broken me. All of these things that have happened here and during this time, from Lear resigning the throne, through taking care of him on the heath, through watching him die, through watching Cordelia die, through seeing his daughters mistreat him, has just broken me. And I'm too old for this. I've got nothing left and I can feel it. And the reason I wonder about that sometimes is the efforts that Shakespeare made to prevent Gloucester from committing suicide. There were lots of ways the play could have gone, I believe, that didn't have to deal with that situation. Now, perhaps Kent doesn't have an Edgar. That's entirely possible. But again, if you look at the line from the Duke of Albany, the oldest have borne most. He has just borne all he can bear, and there's nothing left. There's two ways to look at it, but I think to avoid this play being totally depressing, I do want to try to talk about the idea that he is just old and broken, not that he is going to go kill himself. Then I do want to talk about this idea of the final thoughts on nihilism, and the fact that there is no resolution. You know, the weight of this sad time we must obey. Speak what we feel, not what we ought to say, which is, again, I think, a reference to the very, very beginning. But remember, the idea that words have meaning is what got Lear into trouble. The idea that the daughters spoke what they ought to say, versus what they feel. And I don't know. I'm just kind of getting a little bit wondering if we had no resolution at all. And then, did nothing come of nothing. We're never going to see so much nor live so long. And it's like, well, that's pretty depressing too. And so this idea of nothing coming of nothing, I think the last speech from the Duke of Albany, who's trying to get somebody else to rule the kingdom, does strike me as a strange and depressing situation. Not finally, there's only a couple more things, but I do want to talk about tragedy. I think it's easy to argue that Lear is tragic because the character, the protagonist, is idealistic, the actions have foreseeable consequences, and the actions are preventable. At the same time, one of the most profound statements I've read on tragedy comes from Arthur Miller. Arthur Miller wrote the Willy Loman play Death of a Salesman, and he talks about the possibility of victory must be there in tragedy. Where pathos rules, where pathos is finally derived, a character has fought a battle he could not possibly have won. And I read that thing and I wonder if Lear had a chance. I, honest to God, don't know if Lear had a chance at the start of the play. The second he divides the kingdom, from when he walks on stage with that plan, I don't know if he has a chance. Yes, his witlessness sometimes had moments of sanity, but I don't know if he has a chance. And I don't know if we end this play with the perfectibility of man. I don't know if I walk out of this play thinking, gosh, humans can be fixed. As I said earlier in this presentation, there seems to me to be a big chunk of, um, the nihilism, the nothing has won. Last thing, the play changes with each reading. And this reading for me was far different than the one I had earlier. I think if you read it when you're my age, you'll have a different reading than the one you're having now. In fact, if you read at my age, you might be able to tell me I'm all wet. Okay? The fact that the play can still get under my skin, however, I think reflects its greatness. The fact that I'm still struggling with it, the fact that, Julius Caesar, I didn't have to struggle. It was the same reading I'd had before. Romeo and Juliet, I get to do my rant about how it's a terrible play and how Friar Lawrence is responsible for everything because he's the adult and he should have known better. Macbeth, I think, has that same element of greatness. There are things that kind of get under my skin. Othello, I still wonder why Iago's the way he is, and you just kind of go from there. I hope that I've added some value as we've talked through this thing. I hope that Lear has become a little more accessible than it was at the start. I hope I wasn't a wild-haired person screaming in the heath of a classroom. Hope you all have a good weekend, and we'll start the 12th night on Monday.